You feel older than your age, and it's not just a poetic way of saying you've seen some things. It's a reality you've carried since childhood. While others played without a care in the world, you were watching. Not in a disengaged way, but in a curious, analytical, almost haunting sense. You noticed things most people didn't. You noticed the silences between words, the tension behind a smile, the contradiction in an adult's behavior. You absorbed more than you should have, too much, in fact, for a mind still forming, and the world in its typical fashion didn't have a category for you. You didn't fit, and you knew it. The conversations bored you. The superficiality frustrated you. It wasn't that you didn't want to belong. You did, but you couldn't pretend. You couldn't shut your mind off, and so you walked through early life with an awareness that seemed mismatched to your years. It made you different. It made you lonely. People would call you an old soul, as if that label could capture what you were dealing with, but they didn't understand what it felt like. They didn't understand that behind that calm demeanor was a restless storm. You were analyzing, questioning, wondering why people hurt each other, why no one talked about the truth, why there was so much noise and so little meaning. There's a kind of sorrow that comes with this kind of early maturity. Not depression, necessarily, but a heaviness, a sense of responsibility that no one asked you to carry, yet you couldn't put down. You saw brokenness in your family, in your school, in your community. And even if you didn't have the words for it yet, you felt it. Deep in your bones, and the worst part, no one else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they didn't care the way you did. So you began to withdraw. Not out of bitterness, but out of preservation. The surface world exhausted you. You needed solitude like others needed oxygen. Books became your companions. Thoughts became your playground. You began to form your own worldview, not because you wanted to be rebellious, but because the ones offered to you were full of contradictions. And over time, you started to realize something. You weren't just mentally ahead. You were emotionally ancient. You could read people. You knew what they were about before they even spoke. You could sense when someone was lying to themselves. You could sense when someone was empty, and you didn't take pleasure in it. You grieved it because you saw what they could be. You saw the beauty beneath the mask, but that level of perception, it's isolating. People don't like mirrors, and that's what you are, whether you want to be or not. A mirror to their chaos, a reminder of their unresolved potential, a silent challenge to their complacency, and so you find yourself misunderstood, labeled as intense, too serious, aloof. But they don't see the weight you're carrying. They don't see that you're not trying to be mysterious. You're trying to survive in a world that operates 10 octaves below your frequency. And here's the paradox: you crave connection deeply, but not the kind that just scratches the surface. You want the kind that tears down the walls, the kind that doesn't fear vulnerability, the kind that asks the real questions. Who are you beneath the masks? What keeps you awake at night? What do you believe in so deeply you'd suffer for it? But that kind of depth, it's rare, and so are the people who can meet you there. So you wait, and in the waiting you grow, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. You start to see that your early awareness wasn't a curse, it was a calling. It was an initiation into a deeper mode of being, a mode that doesn't settle for distraction, that doesn't numb out, that insists on meaning even when it costs you everything. You feel older than your age because in many ways you are. Not in years, but in consciousness. You've lived 100 lives in your mind. You've suffered losses that weren't even yours. You've built castles of understanding while others built walls of denial. And you know that this path isn't easy, but it's real, and for someone like you, that's the only thing worth walking. There's a restlessness in you that can't be soothed by surface, level answers. You don't just want to know the truth. You need it. It's not a preference. It's not a hobby. It's an ache. A force that drives you forward even when it leads you into discomfort, isolation, or darkness. Because for you, truth isn't just an idea. It's sacred. It's the only thing solid in a world full of illusions. Most people avoid the truth, and not because they are bad or weak, but because it hurts. It strips away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves to keep functioning. But not you. You walk straight into the fire. You tear apart your own beliefs. You question your own motives. You turn the spotlight on yourself first, not last, because you understand something most don't. The cost of ignoring the truth is always greater than the pain of facing it. You've lost people over it. You've sat across from someone you cared about, someone who was feeding you a sugar-coated story, and instead of nodding and playing along, you spoke up. You asked the real question. You challenged the narrative. You called out the contradiction. And the moment you did, you could feel the distance forming, like a wall being built in real time. But you said it anyway, because you couldn't pretend. It's not that you want to be confrontational. You're not chasing conflict. You're chasing clarity. You want to understand why things are the way they are, why people act against their own values, why we sabotage what we love, why we cling to what is broken just because it's familiar. You dig until it's raw, until it's exposed, until the mask falls off. And the truth is, most people aren't ready for that. You've seen how uncomfortable it makes them. The shifting in their seats, the halves, miles, the silence, but you don't stop. You can't, because somewhere deep in your psyche there's this unshakable belief, if we can just get to the truth about ourselves, about our pain, about the systems we live in, then we can heal. Then we can change. Then we can actually build something that lasts. This craving, it doesn't turn off. It follows you everywhere. It shows up in the questions you ask late at night. It shows up in the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the conversations you can't stand because they're all polish and no substance. You've probably been called too intense, too serious, or obsessed. And maybe you are. But you'd rather be obsessed with the truth than numb with denial, and truth isn't clean, it's messy, it dismantles things, it reveals the parts of yourself you'd rather hide, the resentment, the envy, the fear, the guilt. But that's the point. You're not chasing truth to feel good. You're chasing it to become whole, to integrate the fractured parts, to stop living in fragments and finally see yourself and the world as it actually is. You've learned to sit with hard realities. You've stared down things most people run from. Maybe that's trauma. Maybe that's loss. Maybe that's the recognition that the people you looked up to weren't who you thought they were. And while others drowned those realizations in distraction, you sat with them, you wrestled with them, you asked, "What now?" and kept moving. It's not an easy life. You don't get applause for it. You don't get comfort. But what you do get is clarity. You see through the games, you see through the manipulation, you see when people are lying to you, and worse, when they're lying to themselves. And even if you don't always say something, you know. You always know, but truth isn't just something you extract from the world. It's something you live, and that's the real challenge, because once you know better, you can't unknow it. You have to act differently. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to walk a straight line even when it's uphill, and you do. Not because it's easy, not because it's popular, but because it's right. And here's what people don't understand about you. You're not looking for perfection. You're not trying to win arguments or prove you're right. You're trying to see clearly. That's it. That's the whole game. Because in that clarity, there's freedom. In that clarity, there's power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. Power to break cycles. Power to rise above your past. Power to become someone who doesn't just survive life, but transforms it. You don't just live through experiences, you examine them. You go back over the moments in your day, dissecting what you said, how you felt, what the other person might have meant, and what it reveals about you. It's not obsession, it's instinct. You have this compulsion to understand yourself, not just on the surface level of traits or preferences, but deep down in the roots of who you are. You're not satisfied with labels or identities handed to you by society. You want to know why you think the way you do, where your patterns come from, what your inner voice is really saying when the noise fades. This kind of introspection is not common. It's not comfortable either. Most people live externally, caught in the next task, the next distraction, the next fleeting validation, but you look inward, and in doing so, you see things that others don't want to face. You see the contradiction between your values and your actions. You catch the tiny betrayals of your own integrity. You feel the sting of moments where you weren't fully honest with others or with yourself. And it eats at you not because you're self-loathing, but because you're seeking something real. Something aligned. You've probably been accused of overthinking. People tell you to just relax or let it go. But they don't understand that your mind doesn't work like that. You don't look at things once and move on. You turn them over. You replay them, not to torture yourself, but to learn. You're trying to extract meaning from every experience. You're trying to grow, and that growth doesn't happen on autopilot. It happens in the trenches of reflection, where you sit with your flaws and fears and ask hard questions. What's strange is how quiet this process is. On the outside, you may seem calm, composed, even distant, but inside, there's a whole world unfolding. Conversations looping, emotions being decoded, memories resurfacing at random, asking to be reinterpreted. You might remember something small someone said to you years ago, and only now realize the depth behind it. That's how your mind works. It links, it maps, it integrates. You're not just reacting to life, you're decoding it. This inner world can feel like both a sanctuary and a trap. Sometimes it brings you incredible insight. You connect dots others don't even see. You find meaning in places others overlook. You understand yourself and others with a depth that can feel like a kind of superpower, but other times it becomes overwhelming. You spiral. You analyze to the point of paralysis. You ask questions that don't have answers. You want certainty in a world that offers very little of it. Still, you wouldn't trade it. Because through that introspection, you've developed a kind of inner compass. You know when something is off, even if you can't explain it right away. You can feel the gap between what you're doing and who you're meant to be, and you trust that feeling. You may not always know what to do with it, but you listen. Because you've learned that ignoring your inner voice doesn't silence it. It just makes you hollow, and it's not just self-reflection. You think deeply about others too. You try to understand why people behave the way they do. You consider their upbringing, their wounds, their conditioning. You can empathize with someone even while they hurt you, because you see the mechanisms behind their behavior. It doesn't mean you accept mistreatment. It means you recognize the complexity of human nature, starting with your own. This kind of introspection makes you slow to judge, but quick to withdraw. You don't engage in shallow arguments or drama because you know it's all surface noise. You crave depth. You want conversations that go beneath the skin, that explore the stuff most people are afraid to touch. You want to talk about pain and purpose and the masks we wear, not to impress anyone, but because that's where the truth lies. You're not looking for perfection in yourself. You're looking for clarity. You're looking for the origin of your fears, the shape of your desires, the hidden assumptions that steer your choices. And as hard as that process is, it gives you something rare, self-awareness. The kind that doesn't just change your behavior, it changes your being. You become someone who can navigate life with eyes wide open, not because it's easier, but because it's realer. And for someone like you, that's the only way to live. You've always felt like you were on the outside looking in. Not because you were excluded, not even necessarily because others pushed you away, but because something in you couldn't quite sync with the crowd. You'd be in a group, surrounded by laughter, by conversation, by a rhythm everyone else seemed to follow, and yet there was this disconnect. Like you were watching a play, aware of the script, but never quite able to step into character. You could mimic it, sure, for a while, smile when expected, nod at the right cues, but it never felt real. It felt like a costume, one you eventually grew tired of wearing. It wasn't always obvious at first. Maybe you tried to belong, maybe you even worked hard at it, adjusting your tone, your language, your interests, shaving off parts of yourself that didn't fit. You didn't do it out of weakness. You did it out of a deep desire to connect, but the more you tried to blend in, the more you felt like you were disappearing. You became a version of yourself that pleased the room but betrayed your own soul. And that kind of self-abandonment doesn't go unnoticed, not by someone as aware as you. You started to see how much of the world operates on unspoken rules, on groupthink, on collective assumptions no one dares to challenge. You saw how people bonded over conformity, shared opinions, shared enemies, shared scripts, and you couldn't unsee it. You began to realize that your discomfort wasn't a flaw. It was evidence. Evidence that your mind worked differently, that your values weren't up for sale, that your hunger for authenticity outweighed your need for approval. The more you understood this, the more exhausting it became to keep pretending. The laughter started to sound hollow. The small talk unbearable. You'd leave social events not just drained, but numb, and eventually something in you snapped. Not in bitterness, but in clarity. You stopped trying to belong where you were never meant to. You stopped watering yourself down to avoid making others uncomfortable. You stopped apologizing for your depth, your standards, your intensity. You stopped seeking a place at the table and started building your own. People noticed the shift. Some respected it, others resented it. Because the truth is, when you stop trying to fit in, you break the invisible contract. You stop playing by the rules everyone else silently agreed to. And that makes people nervous. It forces them to confront their own compromises, but that's not your problem. You didn't come here to make people comfortable. You came here to be whole. Fitting in was never going to work for someone like you because you see through things. You question what others accept. You challenge what others avoid. That makes you disruptive, not in the loud, chaotic sense, but in the quiet, unsettling way that makes others reevaluate themselves. You're not trying to be superior. You're trying to be real. But in a culture that rewards performance, realness is often mistaken for rebellion. And yes, the loneliness still lingers. Sometimes it hits you in the most unexpected ways. A conversation that falls flat, a laugh you can't join, a silence that feels too wide to bridge. But it's not the same kind of loneliness you once felt. It's cleaner now. It's the kind of solitude that comes from being aligned with yourself, even if that means standing apart. You've learned to prefer your own company to the noise of shallow connection. You'd rather be misunderstood in truth than accepted in pretense. What you've come to understand is that not fitting in isn't a defect. It's an indication. It means your design isn't meant for the average template. It means your path isn't going to be crowded. It means your values, your thoughts, your presence. It all carries a frequency that not everyone can tune into, and that's not just okay, it's necessary, because people like you don't follow the map. You draw new ones, you don't echo the culture, you question it, you don't settle into your role, you outgrow it, so no, you don't fit in, you probably never will, but you've stopped seeing that as a curse. You've stopped fighting to sit at tables where you'd have to shrink to stay. You've chosen something harder but far more honest, the pursuit of a life that reflects who you really are. And that decision, that quiet, defiant choice to live in truth over comfort, that's what sets you apart. You've never been drawn to the easy answers. In fact, simplicity often leaves you suspicious, like something important is being skipped over, like the truth has been shaved down to make it easier to swallow. You don't trust surface explanations because you know reality doesn't work that way. Life isn't clean, people aren't linear, emotions don't follow a script, and instead of avoiding that chaos, you lean into it. You're attracted to it, not because you enjoy confusion, but because you know that underneath the layers there's something real. something raw, something worth knowing. You're not content with what things appear to be. You want to know how they work. You want to know why someone said what they did, even when they claimed it meant nothing. You want to understand the subtext of a conversation, the tension behind a glance, the contradiction in someone's behavior. You want to get it, not in a superficial way, but in a way that cuts to the core. You don't just gather facts, you dig for meaning. This tendency makes you a kind of psychological detective, always watching, always analyzing. You're not being nosy or judgmental. You're trying to see, to make sense of the chaos, to draw connections between seemingly unrelated things. Most people look at a situation and see what's obvious. You see the 10 invisible threads holding it together. You see the trauma under the anger, the fear under the arrogance, the longing behind the withdrawal. You see that nothing is ever just one thing, and that's exactly what pulls you in. You crave depth. Complexity excites your mind the way novelty excites most others. It's not enough for you to know that something is. You need to know why it is, what formed it, how it evolved, and what it says about the world we live in. Whether it's philosophy, psychology, art, history, or even just a passing conversation with a stranger, you're always searching for the deeper architecture beneath the moment, but this trait also makes things harder. Because when you're attracted to complexity, you can't play the game the way others do. You don't do well with small talk. You struggle with rules that exist just for the sake of tradition. You question hierarchies, social norms, the systems everyone else seems to accept without thinking. That can make you seem like a skeptic or a contrarian or someone who overcomplicates everything, but that's not it at all. You just can't unsee what's beneath the surface once you've glimpsed it. Even your relationships are shaped by this pull toward complexity. You can't be satisfied by connections that stay on the surface. You need people who challenge you, people who are willing to be vulnerable, to explore ideas, to wrestle with doubt and duality. You're not scared of someone's mess. You're scared of someone who won't admit they have one. You want to understand people in their entirety, the light and the dark, the beautiful and the broken, and you want to be understood that way too. This mindset can be exhausting. You don't always get to rest. Your mind is constantly working, turning things over, mapping them out. Sometimes you wish you could just let things be simple, but that's not how you're wired. And the truth is, you don't want simplicity, not really, because in complexity there's challenge, and in challenge there's growth. You've learned more about yourself by facing uncomfortable truths than you ever did by playing it safe. Complexity has also taught you humility. The more you understand, the more you realize how much you don't know. You've seen how multiple truths can coexist, how good people can do harmful things, how love can carry pain, how certainty can blind us. You've accepted that life is full of paradoxes, and instead of resisting that, you embrace it. Because you know that maturity isn't about choosing sides. It's about learning to hold opposites without breaking. This attraction to complexity, this hunger for depth, is not a phase. It's a part of your nature. You're wired for nuance. You're driven by curiosity. You're pulled toward the things others avoid because that's where the real substance is. And no, it doesn't make your life easier, but it makes it real. It makes it honest, and for someone like you, that's worth everything. There's something inside you that doesn't leave you alone. It's quiet, but relentless. It's not loud enough to explain to other people. Not yet. But it's strong enough to keep you awake at night. It's not ambition. It's not a checklist of goals. It's not tied to what the world applauds. It's deeper than that, older than that. It feels less like something you want and more like something you were born with. A pull, a whisper, a sense that there's something you're meant to do, meant to build, meant to become, even if the shape of it is still blurry. You've tried to ignore it, tried to distract yourself with routine, with work, with what's expected. You've tried to follow the conventional paths, thinking maybe it'll go away, but it never does. That itch in your spirit. That friction between what you're doing and what you know you could be doing, it grows, and even when you can't explain it, you feel it. Like a map written in a language you haven't learned yet, but instinctively know how to follow. It's frustrating because people expect clarity. They want a title, a plan, a clear trajectory, but all you have is a direction, a feeling, a deep conviction that your life is meant for something that matters. Something that aligns with your values, your voice, your unique wiring. You can't define it in a sentence. You can't point to it on a chart, but you know it when you're close to it, and you definitely know it when you're far away. There have been moments, fleeting, powerful moments, when it's felt like everything clicked, when you were doing something, speaking something, creating something, and your whole being said, yes, this. More of this. Those moments don't come often, but when they do, they leave a mark. They remind you of what's possible. They give you a glimpse of that calling, like a flash of lightning in the dark. And once you've had a taste of that alignment, you can't settle anymore. Not truly, not without betraying something essential inside you. You've probably gone through seasons of deep confusion. You've questioned your path. You've compared yourself to others who seem more certain, more together, more in line with what the world celebrates. You've felt the weight of not having a clear answer to the question, what do you want to do with your life? And yet, even in those moments of doubt, the calling doesn't fade. It just waits. It waits for you to grow into the kind of person who can carry it. Because that's the truth most people don't talk about. Your calling isn't just about what you do. It's about who you're becoming. It's not something you achieve. It's something you embody, and that takes time. It takes pain. It takes breaking down the false layers, the expectations, the conditioning, the fear, and finding what's true underneath. That's not a weekend project. That's a lifetime of inner work. But for someone like you, it's the only work that matters. You're not waiting to be handed a purpose. You're uncovering it, bit by bit, experience by experience, and sometimes that process feels aimless. You take jobs that don't feel quite right. You meet people who don't understand you. You pursue paths that look promising on paper but feel empty in your chest, but none of it is wasted. Every misstep, every closed door, every wrong turn, it's all part of the process of elimination. It's how you narrow the gap between what you thought would fulfill you and what actually does. You've learned to listen more closely, not just to the noise around you, but to the quiet truth inside you. The part of you that knows when something is off. The part that lights up when something is aligned. That inner signal has become your compass. And even when you can't see the whole map, that signal keeps you moving, keeps you searching, keeps you hopeful. You're not lost. You're in the middle of becoming, and that calling, that undefined, undeniable calling isn't proof that you're behind. It's proof that you're alive. It's a reminder that you're not here to copy someone else's blueprint. You're here to carve your own, and maybe the reason it doesn't fit into words yet is because it's bigger than words. Maybe it's meant to be lived before it can be explained. There's a heaviness to you that most people can't see. Not because you're broken or weak, but because you feel things on a level that isn't typical. Emotions don't just pass through you. They settle, they stay, they echo. You pick up on the unspoken tension in a room, the pain behind someone's smile, the grief sitting in someone's silence. It's not something you choose. It's something you carry. Not out of obligation, but because you were built to notice. You absorb the emotional currents around you like a sponge, and they stay with you long after everyone else has moved on. You've probably been told you're too sensitive, that you take things too seriously, that you need to let it go. But people don't understand what it's like to have an emotional ecosystem that registers everything. You don't just feel your own emotions, you feel theirs. You pick up on pain that no one admits out loud. You notice the subtle shift in someone's tone, the glance that reveals more than words ever could. And it affects you, sometimes deeply. You carry memories that others have long forgotten, not because you want to, but because they marked you. Words that cut, moments that cracked your perception of safety, losses that shook your foundation. They don't leave you easily. They revisit you in quiet moments, not to torment, but to remind you that you've lived through things, that you've survived. But even survival comes at a cost. The emotional weight builds. And some days, it's hard to know where to put it all. There are times when you feel like you're walking through life with a backpack full of invisible bricks, memories, regrets, unspoken conversations, unresolved grief. You can function, you can smile, you can show up, but it's always there, just under the surface, that quiet hum of weight that never really goes away. You've learned to live with it, you've had to, but that doesn't mean it's easy. What's more, people often come to you with their weight. They sense something in you, a capacity, a depth, a presence, and they open up. They tell you their struggles, their secrets, their fears, and you listen not just with your ears, but with your entire being. You absorb it, not out of duty, but out of compassion, because you understand what it means to carry things alone, and you wouldn't wish that on anyone. But what no one sees is that after they leave, you're the one left holding the pieces. You don't complain, you don't seek attention, you deal with it quietly, often in solitude. Maybe you write, maybe you go for long walks, maybe you sit in silence, trying to process the storm inside you without letting it spill onto others. You've become the strong one, the grounded one, the one who can handle the emotional fallout, and you can, but that doesn't mean it doesn't cost you. That doesn't mean it doesn't erode parts of you over time. This emotional weight shapes the way you move through the world. You can't watch the news without feeling it in your chest. You can't walk past a stranger crying without wondering about their story. You can't disconnect, even when you try. It's not that you want to carry the weight of the world, it's that you can't unsee it. You can't numb yourself the way others do, and deep down you don't want to, because you know that the weight you carry has made you who you are. It's made you more compassionate, more aware, more connected. You notice what others miss. You comfort in ways that words can't reach. You understand people in their rawest states, and you love them anyway. Even when they push you away, even when they don't understand you, you love with the weight of everything you've ever felt. And that kind of love, that kind of presence is rare. But even as you hold space for others, you're learning, slowly, painfully, that you need space for yourself too. You need people who will hold you. You need to put the weight down sometimes. Not forever, not entirely. Just long enough to breathe, to be, to remember that you don't have to carry it all alone. And maybe that's the hardest lesson for someone like you, realizing that strength isn't just about how much you can carry. It's also about knowing when to let go, when to rest, when to ask for help, even when you've been the helper for so long. Because the weight will always be there, but you don't have to let it bury you. There's something in you that just won't allow you to coast. No matter how convenient it might be, no matter how many people around you have accepted good enough as their final destination, you can't. You physically can't. There's a fire in your gut that makes mediocrity feel like a betrayal, a slow death. You've tried to ignore it. You've tried to silence that inner voice telling you there's more to give, more to become, more to create. But it never shuts up. It haunts you, because deep down you know what you're capable of, and you know the cost of pretending you don't. It's not about ego. It's not about being the best in the room or impressing the crowd. It's about being in alignment with your own potential, that gnawing feeling when you know you're playing small, That frustration when you're surrounded by people who choose ease over excellence. That ache when you look in the mirror and realize you've been dimming your light to make others comfortable. Mediocrity demands that you ignore what you know to be true about yourself, and that's something you simply won't do. You've always had a sense that there's something more at stake, that your time here isn't infinite, that the clock is ticking, and every moment wasted in mediocrity is a moment stolen from who you were meant to become. That awareness sharpens you. It creates a kind of sacred urgency. You're not in a rush, but you're not idle either. You're driven, not by fear, but by clarity. You know what it feels like to look around and see people settle into routines that numb them, relationships that stunt them, jobs that drain them. And you know, with a kind of painful certainty, that if you ever gave in to that, it would kill something vital in you. You've probably been misunderstood because of this. People think you're intense, picky, never satisfied. They think you always want more. But what they don't see is that it's not about more, it's about meaning. You're not chasing quantity, you're chasing quality, depth, purpose. You're not asking for perfection. You're demanding truth. You want to wake up in the morning and know that you're living in a way that honors your mind, your values, your calling. Anything less feels like a waste of breath. The cost of refusing mediocrity is high. It means walking away from safe paths. It means saying no to comfort. It means choosing growth when you could choose rest. It means disappointing people who wanted you to be more palatable, more predictable. It means being willing to stand alone in a world that celebrates compromise. But you don't do it for applause. You do it because you've seen what happens to people who trade their potential for convenience. They shrink, they get bitter, they wonder what could have been, and you've sworn to yourself that you won't end up there. You demand more from yourself not because you think you're broken, but because you know you're responsible. Responsible for your gifts, for your voice, for your path. Mediocrity asks nothing of you, and that's exactly why you reject it. Because anything that doesn't demand your full engagement isn't worthy of your time. You'd rather fail chasing something real than succeed at something hollow. You'd rather break yourself trying to build something meaningful than sit in comfort watching your soul atrophy. And yes, it's exhausting. The standards you hold yourself to aren't easy. The pressure can be overwhelming. There are days you want to give in, to just settle, to just be normal, to stop caring so damn much, but you can't, and somewhere deep inside, you don't want to. Because you know what's on the other side of that struggle. You know what it feels like to be proud of your work, to be in love with your life, to stand in the middle of something you built and know that it's yours, earned, honest, alive. This refusal to settle is what separates you, not because you're better, but because you're awake, and staying awake in a world that thrives on numbness is a radical act. You're not here to blend in, you're here to rise. And no matter how long it takes, no matter how many times you fall, you've already decided you're not going to trade your potential for a paycheck. You're not going to trade your passion for approval. You're not going to give your life to mediocrity, not now, not ever. So if any of this resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you were wired differently, burdened with intensity, purpose, or perception most people don't understand, know this: you're not broken. You're not lost, you're rare, and rare things aren't meant to blend in. They're meant to stand out, to disrupt, to awaken. Your path may be harder, lonelier, and slower, but it's real, and that's the cost of authenticity. That's the price of becoming who you truly are. So don't dull your edges to fit into a dull world. Don't apologize for your depth, your fire, your refusal to accept the ordinary. The world may not know what to do with you yet, but one day it will. One day your rare will be your power. Keep going. You're not here to fit in. You're here to rise.